I was with my daughter in Oregon. We were doing a ghost investigation at the Shanghai tunnels, and we rented a cabin that was halfway between Portland and the ocean. So one morning we got up and said, we're going to go to the ocean, and we started driving towards the interstate. And out in this field, I saw these trees stuck in the ground upside down. I had seen a documentary, it's Myths and Monsters of Alaska, and one of the segments was on Prince of Wales Island. The story is that the hairy men take blown down trees and stick them in the ground upside down as territory markers. So this really intrigued me that this could actually be something to look into. So once I got back to Ohio, I got my sister and I drug her to Salt Fork State Park because that's theoretically the hotspot, Bigfoot hotspot in Ohio. And we had no idea what we were doing. So we parked the car, we started walking this trail that goes around the lake, and we wandered into a ravine a little ways, and we sat down. We thought we'd just sit there and listen. And my sister looked down, and in the leaf litter was the perfect imprint of what I would call a Bigfoot footprint. So that's what got me started.
Well, that's pretty impressive. What did you make of those trees? Did you get any pictures of those trees upside down, stuck in the ground? That's the first time I've heard of that.
Yes, they're in my book.
Okay, I'll take a look at it.
Okay.
So very fascinating. I find that interesting. So then you've had some evidence here, and then where did you go from there? I'm originally from Columbus, so it's about an hour and a half drive to Salt Fork from where I'm at, and we would go there on occasion every couple months or so. And on one occasion, we climbed this hill that was adjacent to where we found the initial footprint. And on top of the hill, we found what looked to be a Bigfoot structure that I had seen on the documentaries. And I took pictures, and over a summer, actually, I took pictures of this. And as I compared the pictures that I've taken over time, it seemed that the structure had changed. Items were added, items were taken away, that type of thing, just subtle changes. And it led me to believe that this could be a way that they communicate. This could be a billboard for scattered groups of Bigfoots to ascertain information. If you change the structure, you change the message. It was just, it seemed like that would be a way for them to do something like that. Well, yeah. Which there again, first I've heard of that too. That's interesting.
Okay.
So were there other pieces of evidence that you began to piece together?
We found tracks. I have actually cast 8 footprint tracks, 1 knuckle print. And the structures that I find in Bigfoot active areas are amazing. I've been doing this for 20 years, and it's amazing that I can go into a location that's active and that has Bigfoot activity and see structures or types of structures that I have never seen before. It's just the complexity and the variety. It seems like it's never ending.
Give me an example of some of those structures.
One that we found, was there was an area where pine trees were draped over a trail. I initially thought this was just snow load, but in Ohio, we only get like 3 feet of snow on the average winter. And over time, the tops of the trees were woven together to form like this really ornate structure that was 12 feet off the ground. And it was done without the use of any ropes or bindings. And my first impression of this is that it could be artistic expression because it has nothing to do with survival, habitat, attaining food, that type of thing.
Again, something I haven't heard before. That's really absolutely fascinating. And have you seen those over and over, or was it just that one occasion?
Just that one occasion. I've never seen that repeated in any of my travels.
Was there other evidence of Bigfoot in that vicinity?
Yes, I had cast, I believe, 3 footprints in that one area. And I would go into this one area in the month of March to cast my footprints, because it seems like this could be either a travel area or a migratory area, where when I go in there late winter, early spring, when the snow melts, when the rains start, and the mud is nice and gooey and everything like that, the tracks are easy to find there. And I usually did find tracks there at that time of year, but exclusively that time of year.
Yeah. Do you go back there still?
No, that was in Ohio. I have since retired to Tennessee.
Okay, so it's a little bit of a drive up there.
Right.
Okay. Anyone else that you know still keeping an eye on that area?
Not that I'm aware of. I know Salt Fork State Park is, like I said, a hotspot in the state of Ohio for Bigfoot activity. But I believe that a lot of the people who go there looking for Bigfoot are involved in groups. I know the BFRO has done campouts there, to where they take you out at night and you hoop and holler and tree knock and all that stuff. But as far as boots on the ground and investigators, I'm not aware of very many, but I'm sure there are.
So what do you think Bigfoot is?
I think Bigfoot is an unknown primate. I don't believe it is a human or a human relative. I don't believe it is Gigantopithecus. I believe it's its own species, a gorilla lineage species.
Okay. And do you think that it has any kind of paranormal qualities to it? I mean, there's a lot of talk about that.
No, I have never encountered that. With this being such an unknown, you can't say they don't, but I would say it's unlikely. A lot of the supernatural attributes they put on this is either cloaking or being interdimensional. But one thing I ran into, my sister and I walked a dry creek bed back a ways to where some caves were, and the terrain started getting rough, so we didn't continue. And I just stood there and took pictures into the woods, just clicking pictures. And once I looked at them on my computer, I saw these black dots in the distance, and I enlarged them, and there were 4 Bigfoot hunkered down in the brush watching us. And those pictures are in my book. But if you go into the woods and you jump a deer, you're going to watch that deer until it gets out of eyesight. If you go into the woods and you jump a Bigfoot, they're going to hunker down in the brush, and they're going to blend in, and you're going to look and say, well, that Bigfoot just disappeared. It had to cloak. It had to step into another dimension or something along those lines, because Bigfoot knows 2 things about humans. They know we key in on motion, and we can kill from a distance. So they hunker down, they blend in. When we were in that area, there was no movement, no sound, no smells, nothing to indicate they were there. So they are very good at what they do.
What about the orb phenomena? Have you ever seen anything like that around them?
No, but have you ever heard of the Brown Mountain Lights?
I have not.
Okay. The Brown Mountain Lights are orbs of lights in North Carolina that people have been seeing for hundreds of years. They say they could be like the spirits of Native American after a war situation or something along those lines. But my wife and I went there, and we actually saw the Brown Mountain Lights, and they were just orbs of light, different color, that interacted with each other. One of them actually shot up into the air and danced around or whatever, and they just
winked out one by one. Now, I don't think this is associated with Bigfoot, but from documentaries that I've seen where they have shown these orbs of light, it's the same thing I saw in Brown Mountain. I don't think there's a correlation between Bigfoot and the lights. I think these lights are naturally occurring, but of unknown origin. But I think they're associating Bigfoot with these lights along the supernatural theme that goes along with it.
How about anything with, like batteries being drained or electrical oddities around them?
No, not that I've ever encountered, no.
Okay. So you have in your book a chapter called Sasquatch and Remote Viewing. What is that about?
I went into a Bigfoot active area in Salt Fork State Park, and my point and shoot camera, the shutter motor had gone out. So I was using a night vision camera in daytime mode, taking pictures, and I took an interesting picture of what looked like a Bigfoot face impressed in the environment. That picture is in my book also. And it got me thinking. I had seen documentaries about remote viewing that the CIA and spy organizations had used to spy on the Russians or Chinese or whatever. And there's been pros and cons on this. But if people can do it, it could be a primate thing. And a Bigfoot could actually do that to increase their ability to be elusive. But I've never been able to recreate that picture, even though I've tried a couple times. It could be so. It could be, just pareidolia or whatever.
Right. Well, what else is in your book, or what else have you discovered about Bigfoot that might be interesting for the audience?
The main thing that I have found about Bigfoot, the most interesting thing that I've encountered are the structures. I have looked for structures in Ohio. I have found them in Tennessee. I actually found some in Nova Scotia when I was on a bear hunt. And I have found very similar structures in all of these locations. And in the documentary, Bigfoot, the Definitive Guide, Dr. Ian Redmond found the same type of structure on Vancouver Island. So if he's finding the same type of structures in Vancouver Island that I found in Ohio and Nova Scotia, this has to be learned activity. When I post structures on social media, I get replies that, oh, I found one of those in Arkansas, or I found one of those in Pennsylvania, or that type of thing. This has to be a form of communication, in my opinion, that is taught, and they teach their young to carry on the tradition, but it's their way of communicating.
What do you think it's communicating?
Whatever they want to say. It would be hard to say. You can't get into Bigfoot's mind, but I would say just general knowledge, information about their group or their groups, or maybe dangers ahead, dangers that they found, that type of thing. Warnings, information, pleasantries. Who would know,
Well, some structures are rather massive. I don't know if you've run into those or not. And some people seem to think there's some type of a shelter. Have you run into anything like that?
I have found a nest in Salt Fork where the brush was piled over and made into like an igloo type situation that I could actually walk straight into without bending over. I believe that was, I don't believe that's where they live. I think this could be, from the location, I believe this could be possibly a shelter from bad weather, or possibly even a hunting blind. I don't think we've actually found anywhere where they live, in my opinion. I haven't.
What is your opinion about the lack of a body or bones or anything like that?
Well, in my book, I cover a section to where in the 1800s, when they were clearing land in the Ohio Valley or whatever for farming and agriculture, they would find giant bones on occasion. And they sometimes attributed this to being Nephilim from the Bible, and they would rebury them or that type of thing, or they would just be scattered or destroyed or put on display and eventually forgotten. These could actually be Bigfoot bones that they're finding instead of giant humans, or of course you could have both. And another thing, a lot of people believe that Bigfoot bury their dead, not in the human sense where they dig a hole and cover that way, but I believe that they put them like in a mound. They put, just cover the cadavers with dirt, forming a mound, and that could be how the mound building Native Americans learned how to do what they do, just watching the Bigfoot.
Did you do any research from the Native American perspective when you wrote your book?
No.
Okay.
I just went a lot from personal experience and what I've learned from other people, that type of thing.
So you have a chapter called Native Legends on the Hairy Man. What does that talk about?
It talks about the different tribes, different names for Bigfoot. Seems like every tribe had a different name for Bigfoot, which means like hairy man or ghost of the forest or that type of thing. If you look at the Native American mythology, the beasts that they usually describe are Bigfoot type beasts instead of like giants or something that European myths and legends would include.
Right, that is true. So what is the Minnesota Iceman?
Minnesota Iceman was, I don't think anybody knows. It was supposed to be a wild man encased in ice, and there were copies made and that type of thing. It was more of a circus attraction than a scientific entity or something that scientists would examine and study. There were different stories about how it was found. So there's a lot of mistruths. I don't think that was valid in any way, but a lot of or several scientists examining this were convinced that it was authentic.
Do you think that was a Bigfoot?
I don't personally, but a few scientists thought it could be, but I don't think that it was thawed out and examined properly, and eventually it just disappeared.
Right.
It's like the one that the boys in Georgia did, where they froze a Halloween costume and said it was a Bigfoot. So that type of thing.
What do you think of the research done today, the way that's it being approached, and any evidence that's coming out of it?
I think Meldrum is doing quite a bit. He investigates what is presented to him. I don't think he goes out in the field anymore to conduct his own investigations. A lot of the problem is on social media. There is so much emphasis put on the supernatural aspect of it, and I think that's a deterrent to legitimate investigation. That turns a lot of people off, because if you post something that they think is legitimate evidence, then there's a lot of people who come back and downplay it because they say it's not realistic with their concept of what's going on.
Right. So do you think that in your lifetime there will be evidence that will be conclusive about Bigfoot?
Hopefully,
but I'm
And
getting old.
what do you think that will be? What's the most likely amount of evidence, or the thing that's going to turn the viewpoint that, you know, Bigfoot is real and here it is and we have the proof?
They're counting on DNA evidence, but the problem with DNA evidence is that we don't have a database for a Bigfoot to identify with DNA, like the Meldrum study. She said that her findings indicate a human primate hybrid like 10,000 years ago, but the way the evidence was gathered is questionable. So her findings have been questionable. The eDNA is emerging, but then again, you have the same situation to where there's no Bigfoot primate DNA in the database to identify with. It's going to take a body or part of a body, something along those lines, that to actually convince science that this is real. And it's going to take a lot of convincing.
Right. Maybe one of these days Bigfoot will start communicating with humans through those structures. We'll have more of an understanding of how to get that.
All we have to do is figure out what they're saying. Good luck with that.
Have you ever heard the sounds of Bigfoot? Have you ever heard those the vocals?
Yes, I have been growled at twice. That was interesting. Both times were in the same area in Ohio, the same area where the arch pine trees were. Actually, I've heard them whoop, I've heard them scream, and I've heard them whistle. I've heard them tree knock, but I haven't heard what they call the Ohio howl or that type of thing.
What
but
is
I have heard what. Okay.
What does the Ohio howl sound like?
Have you ever watched Finding Bigfoot?
Uh-huh.
And when Bobo does his howl?
Right.
That's it.
That's it. Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Well, do you think they have, I was talking to someone the other day about the zapping, you know, where they can kind of, you know, jar you and kind of electrify you for a moment. Do you, has that ever happened to you?
No. The ultrasound,
Yes.
I believe it's a possibility, but I've never experienced it. I think that they would use that in a situation where they feel uncomfortable or they feel a danger. And the way I present myself when I go investigating in the woods is I don't let them perceive me as a threat. Like when I was growled at those 2 times, I didn't take it as a threat. I took it as a warning that I was too close. There's maybe young nearby or something to where I just had to back off and walk away. And that's exactly what I did. And there was no problems.
What would you advise people who are maybe in a situation like that, in a wooded situation, or researching or not, if they run across a Bigfoot, what's your recommendations or advice?
Take its picture. But be respectful is the main thing. You're in their living room. Be respectful. Don't be an idiot. Don't act, don't be charging to them or hooping and hollering and that type of thing, because they could very well perceive that as a threat and could throw rocks at you or something even more serious. Just be respectful.
Bigfoot's become a rather popular topic right now. There's a lot of stuff on TV about it, lots of documentaries being made on Bigfoot. I mean, there's just a lot of information out there. Why do you think suddenly we have become so infatuated with the whole Bigfoot phenomenon?
I think it's been there all along. Shows like Finding Bigfoot actually brought Bigfoot into our living rooms, and that inspired a lot of people to go into the woods to look for them. And now you have shows like Expedition Bigfoot, whose findings seem to lean more towards the supernatural element of it, whether it's true or not. But apparently they think that's what the audience wants. But the Bigfoot documentaries that I've seen, there's a lot of them on like Tubi and on streaming, that are just people investigating the way they do, respectfully and without the aspects of the supernatural. They're looking for evidence, the tracks, the structures, that type of thing, trying to glean information from that. And those are the positive ones.
Mm-hmm. Well, what else can you tell us about your research, Bigfoot? You know, what would you tell the audience? What do you want them to know?
Well, if you find, the way I look for an active area is I drive up and down old country roads looking for, the first thing I look for is a bent tree, a tree bent over, possibly anchored by a log or something along those lines. If you find those, then get out and look around, because that seems to be a signpost that says, look, there's something else here. And then you look for other structures, more elaborate structures. Then you can look for footprints, that type of thing. It's just a process of knowing what you're looking for and getting to where you want to be in your investigations. And like I said, be respectful, have patience. You're in their living room. Don't be throwing your gum wrappers on the ground or anything like that. Just be respectful. But the information is out there to be found. You just have to know what you're looking for and look for it.
Yeah, it sounds like you've found a lot of places and a lot of evidence of Bigfoot in places that people might not otherwise even notice, some of those structures and things of that nature.
Well, a lot of people think that they have to go 5 miles back in the woods to find Bigfoot evidence. When I was in Ohio, I found evidence not far from where humans were, not far from roads. I believe they use roads as a path of least resistance, but you don't have to go 5 miles back to find this information. It's right there if you know what you're looking for. And I think they do that because, for one thing, they want to keep an eye on us. And if they want to leave a message about human activity, it's better to do it closer to where the humans are, so they have a better understanding of what's going on.
Well, it all started to me way back in the mid-1960s when I was a wee lad. I was a strange kid. I remember my parents bringing home a hardcovers Reader's Digest book from my sister and myself. My sister's 2 years younger than I am. And in this book, there were chapters on everything, you know, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, mountains, you know, general Reader's Digest information. And in the middle of that book, there was a section on the age of the dinosaurs with the beautiful paintings back then, you know, T-Rex standing straight up, dragging his tail on the ground. And they told us brontosaurus was so heavy, he had spent all its time in the water because its legs couldn't support its weight. Thing paleontologists know weren't true now. And right in the middle of that dinosaur section was a little 2-page article with the usual 3 black and white blurry pictures. It's titled "The Thing in Loch Ness." I don't know, some switch went off in my head, and I must have read that thing 100 times and started pestering my parents for more information about it. They gave me a library card, said, "Go to it, kid." And I realized at a very young age I was never, ever going to move to Scotland. So I started reading about this thing in Western Canada called the Sasquatch. And in the United States, they called it Bigfoot. But I think what really did it was not too long after that, on a school night when I should have been in bed, I came downstairs and walked into the living room. My parents were watching a movie on the old black and white TV. And instead of getting the usual, "Hey, what are you doing, boy? It's a school night. Get back up there," you know, like I expected, he said, "Hey, the lad's interested in this kind of thing. Maybe I ought to let him watch this with us." And my mother said something along the lines of, "Oh, no, he can't watch this. He'll have bad dreams," that kind of thing. But my father won the argument, and I'm sure he regretted that ever since. And what was playing was that old Hammer horror film starring Peter Cushing, the abominable snowman of the Himalayas. And I don't know, it was Sasquatch from that moment on.
I can understand. It got your attention.
Yeah,
So have you ever seen one?
I might have.
Describe that. Describe
I,
it to me.
I've always had the philosophy since day one, and I'm always known for this one particular saying: stick to the facts, never deviate from the facts. In March of 2004, I was taking a buddy of mine named John Miles back to the camp at 20 Mile Bay on the west side of Harrison Lake. And about, across from the entrance to Mystery Valley, there is a cut line that goes through the trees, you know, where they put the large power poles through, the power lines through. And at the crest of that hill, just beyond where it goes over the other side, I saw a figure walk from almost the center of that cut line to the trees on the right-hand side. And as I say, it was I stick to the facts, never deviate the facts. And the facts are, it appeared to be upright. It was jet black in color. And I only saw it for about 5 seconds before it disappeared. There wasn't time to bring my Land Rover to a halt, let alone grab the camera and get out of the truck to take a picture of it, which I did. And by the time I did, it was gone. All I looked at John, said, "Did you see that?" And he said, "Yes, I did." But the facts also are, it was too far away to see detail. So I can't say with 100% certainty that it wasn't some big, strange, odd-looking man way up there. If that was a Sasquatch, I have seen one. If it wasn't, I still have not.
Was the movement an indicator? Could you get a sense of how it was moving?
It was walking upright, swinging its arms.
About what size?
Huge. I think if I put a 7-foot man up there from my vantage point, I would barely see him at all. That's how far away it was. I mean, if this was a Sasquatch, it was big even for a Sasquatch. Yeah.
Did you look around at all for any tracks or anything like that?
Oh yeah, I went all the way up there. You know, a herd of wildebeest could move through that area up there, wouldn't leave a sign. I mean, British Columbia is a bad place for tracks unless something happens to sit, you know, a muddy patch on the side of the road or a creek bed or something like that. It used to be a joke in the old days. If you want to see a Sasquatch, go to British Columbia. If you want to see his footprints, go to Northern California.
Right, exactly. So you went on to write, and I'm sure in the process of that you have done a lot of research, and in the midst of all that research, what has caught your attention the most, and what do you feel like you need to dwell on?
Well, as far as I'm see, a researcher is someone trying to find an answer to a question. Okay. So many people today who call themselves researchers, they're not really. They're like religious fanatics trying to push a faith. They believe in the existence of the Sasquatch, and they think it's their job to convince everybody else. To me, it's just as important to find evidence of its non-existence as to its existence, okay? Because we're trying to find an answer to a question. And I'm strictly zoological. If the creature does exist, I think they are primates. They're flesh and blood animals, no paranormal connection or anything like that. They're just flesh and blood animals, and they've always been here. And sightings happen when they come close to people more often than the other way around. If you were to look at my maps here on my office wall, you would see all the pins are along roadways, riverbanks, creek banks, lake shores. But there's vast areas of green there with not a single pin in it. And that's not because there's no Sasquatch there. It's because there's no people there to see it, let alone report it.
So what can you tell me from the point of view of zoology, what you think these things are, why they're out there, if they are out there, what is your opinion on that?
Well, there's no why, they're just there. They've always been there from the beginning. To me, what they are is probably a higher primate of some kind. One of the most popular theories, and you can see the skull of them over my left shoulder here, was an animal that supposedly wouldn't exist 10 to 15,000 years ago, known as Gigantopithecus blacki. and you know, the hypothesis that maybe Giganto crossed over the Barren Land Bridge slowly through time at the same time as the ancestors of our First Nation people did, or Native Americans, as you call them in the United States. And Sasquatch is simply this species continuing. To me, that's the one that probably makes the most sense. But what they are, who they are, where they came from, and all the other aspects of their being is really a moot point until question one is finally confirmed. Are they actually out there?
What do you think will be the evidence, the breaker that would make or break to prove 100% or at least to some kind of a percentage that they do or do not exist?
Well, the biggest thing will be when science gets what science has always demanded, and they're adamant about this. What they need is a body or piece of the body or sufficient skeletal remains, something that can be sufficiently examined. And even that will be a slow, wound up process before it's generally accepted. It's not like they're going to put a body of a Sasquatch out on the table and the whole world will say it's real the next day. No, other scientists want to look at it, and that slow merry-go-round of acceptance will go on. And then some politician will go, do we need to protect our seeds? Then that slow merry-go-round will get started. And that's just how it works. And no amount of politically correct wishful thinking will ever change it, because that's just the way it happens.
So even if something definitive were found, it would still take a long time before it would be an acceptable.
It would cause a lot of excitement and stuff. But again, they won't stick their necks out until it's, confirmable.
Exactly. So what do you think about the DNA that people say they have? Have you read any about that or know anything about it?
Well, it's interesting. There's been a number of samples, I know of a few myself, in which they say is probably a higher primate of unknown origin. Well, that just means it's unknown. They have no Sasquatch to compare it to, so there's no way they say they can say they have Sasquatch DNA. They have Sasquatch, possible DNA of a primate, maybe. They don't know. I mean, it's class is unidentifiable. That means they can't identify it. And there's it's so easy to contaminate samples. Once someone said, if I mix human hair with a chimpanzee hair and you ground it up to get your metacarpal DNA, would that give you a weird result? And the professor looked at me and called me a name and said, I never thought of that. You bone. So that's the kind of thing you got to watch out for. When it comes to DNA, until there's a Sasquatch to compare it to, it's always going to be either unknown primate or something of that nature.
Difficult to do. Why do you think it's been so very, very difficult to get any kind of evidence? If they are out there, what would be the avenue to get some further evidence? Some kind of, they don't seem to be easily captured. They don't seem to be easily find remains, all of this. That's why they continue to be evasive.
Well, I think the biggest problem is they're probably very, very scarce. I tend to go along with the theory that there's probably one Sasquatch to every 200 bears in any given area. If there are any more than that, I think they'd be seen more often. Any fewer than that doesn't seem to be a viable breeding population. And there's another possibility, too, that people just don't like to admit. The whole thing may be nothing more than mythology and folklore. I don't particularly believe that, but I accept the possibility.
Right. What do you think that people are seeing? And what do you think that would create that illusion, or that they're seeing something that they're identifying as a Bigfoot?
Well, when you're interviewing a witness, and I've always kept this in mind when sticking to the facts and interviewing the facts, when you're interviewing a witness, and I've interviewed hundreds, there's only three possibilities here. Only three. One, they saw a Sasquatch. Two, they mistook someone or something for a Sasquatch. Or three, they're lying. And I'm afraid with the inventions, great tools like the internet and things like that, it's become a soapbox for every snake oil salesman out of there. So number three has become more popular than ever before, and in my opinion, has reached epidemic proportions. in my opinion, 90% what you see on the internet on this subject is absolute BS.
What do you make of the Sierra sounds, the sounds and a lot of the recordings?
Unknown. The original recordings were made by the late Alan Berry, who was a reporter that went up there with them. I talked to him extensively about this, and he said, we never ever, at the time when the Sierra sounds recorded, we never ever really got a look at what's doing it. It just stayed beyond the camp. So who knows? They're baffling, but who knows if they're authentic or not? I know Ron Moorhead, he believes they were authentic, and I can understand his reasons why. But the original recorder of the sounds, the late Alan Berry, who was a reporter, he said we never got a look at it. It was just something circling our camping area, making these odd sounds. There's only one case of recorded noises, vocalizations, in which a Sasquatch was seen just before the recordings were made, and that was the Lummi Reserve recordings in 1975 by Deputy Sheriff Kenny Cooper. They're fascinating sounds. And he had they had their police lights on this thing, and it disappeared in the trees, and the screams came out of the trees after they lost sight of it. And it was recorded over the police mic in the car at the headquarters on a dictaphone. That's the only case I know of where somebody at least saw the animal just before the sounds were recorded. Most of the time, when you hear a noise, a strange noise in the woods, or a strange noise in the woods at night, that's just what they are, strange noises. There could be other explanations for them. And the Sahara sounds are fascinating, but again, it wasn't seen.
What do you have you heard the recording by by Kenny Cooper on the police recording? Have you heard that?
Yes, the Lummi recordings from 1975. Yes, I have.
And what do they sound like?
They're it's a loud, piercing scream. And you got to remember, you're hearing it over the airwaves, over police radio, on the receiver, on the police headquarters, and being recorded on a dictaphone. And I think you got to be my age to remember what a dictaphone is. That's the way they used to record over the radio and telephone back in the day. And it was recorded on that. It's just a continuous, loud, screaming noise. And it raises the hair on your neck pretty well, and it's odd. It really is. Kenny Cooper, who later changed his name to his Lummi First Nation name, which has something like 30 letters in it. I couldn't begin to pronounce it. But he went to his grave saying it was real. And the woman who originally called the police, she's passed away now too. She said, yes, it was a big intruder, a big hairy guy in my backyard when the police came. And that was that resulted in the Lummi recordings in 1975.
It's been back there a ways, about the same time as the Sierra sounds. They were like 72, 74, something like that.
Yeah.
At the same
1973, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. So who would you trust in this to be just a really objective researcher?
Well, there are a lot of good researchers. Unfortunately, there's a lot more bad ones. The bad ones I basically refer to as the inmates running the asylum. You know, they believe in the existence of the Sasquatch, but they associate it with UFOs and hobgoblins and this and that and various other things. And personally, I think this type of researcher, they're not really interested in solving the mystery at all. They love the merry-go-round. They just like being Mulder and Scully, or pretending to be Mulder and Scully. It fills some void in their lives. The people I rely on, well, there are a lot of good researchers, and the names up here in Canada: John Kirk, Bill Reed, a guy named JC. I won't say his full name because he doesn't want his work knowing he's interested in this kind of thing. Down in the States, there are a lot of good researchers. Daniel Perez. They're just. It would take an hour to go through all the names. It would take 3 hours to go through all the names of the bad ones.
There's a lot of them out there. Huh?
Oh, incredible.
So what do we need to know about Bigfoot that you think is important?
Well, the most important thing is trying to answer that question. Is it out there or is it not? I just tell everybody what I've always said. Never go anywhere without at least a camera with you. If you are in a public campground, you have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to go to the outhouse. Take your camera with you. That's, if you don't, you're just another person who says he saw a Sasquatch, and we got thousands of those.
What do you think about the images that are out there? There are a lot of those, but they're just not very conclusive.
Well, again, it's all, no matter what image you get, it's never going to prove the existence of it. Some of them are pretty interesting. A lot of them are just absolute BS. I mean, that's a big part of hoaxing nowadays. And with AI getting more and more easier to use, I think the hoaxing is going to get much worse. I still think the PG film of October 20th, 1967 is, if the Sasquatch exists, it was probably authentic. For various reasons, my research on the film and the fact I know Bob Gimlin, we've been friends for 30 years, and I can't believe he's been lying in my face for 30 years. But again, and of course, the Pheno footage is interesting. There's a couple, I still think the Jebediah State Park footage in 1995 may have been authentic, though other researchers disagree with me. And there's a couple of skunk ape videos I'd like to know a lot more about. But the overwhelming majority is just people playing around, seeing if they can, fool a bunch of people.
What do you think about the families that talk about, clans of Bigfoot on their property, and it's a constant, not necessarily seeing them all the time, but there's some constant interaction sort of, but they do see them occasionally. What do you think about those stories? So they don't want to be known. They don't want any popularity. It's just, that they're just there.
Okay, if they don't want any popularity, why are they even telling us about it?
Well, they're not telling it. It's the research that
actually they are. That's why we know. If you're talking about incidents like the Carter farm,
right?
Yeah. She said they were coming to her door. She was feeding them garlic and everything else. Yet she never produced a single photograph, but a photograph of a stick she said had dropped. I'm sorry. No. Again, it's just people telling stories.
Yeah, all we have right now really pretty much is people telling stories, because there's absolutely no evidence otherwise, right?
Well, it's like I said, there's when I've been researching for as long as I have, 1978, I may have had a fleeting glimpse once, and someone comes around and says they see Sasquatch 5 times a month. That raises red flags to me. There's something wrong with their story.
Yeah.
All you have to do is turn on your common sense switch.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what else can you tell me about your research and where this has taken you? And obviously, you've done a lot of investing of time and effort into this. So what are some of the areas that you have explored that you could share?
Well, I've been all over British Columbia and Western Alberta, up here in Canada, Washington, Oregon, Northern California. Went to Alaska a couple of times, been to the East a few times. Before 1990, the mid-1990s, I was an absolute agnostic at anything in the East part of the continent, but good researchers by good people like Don Keating and Diane Stocking down in Florida and stuff got me convinced that, hey, maybe the creature exists in other parts of the country too. It's not impossible. But to me, the biggest problem, and I'll say it again, is people wanting to BS everybody. I mean, inmates running the asylum and researchers suffering from what I call Ivan Mark syndrome and the hoaxing, which has reached epidemic proportions. It's no wonder mainstream science won't touch this with a 10-foot pole. There was always a saying in British academia, the road to Loch Ness, and career-wise, it was not a good road to be on. So who can blame them for not wanting to touch this? The biggest problem with Sasquatch research is the researchers themselves. Well, to me, the Sasquatch question is simply that. I gave up trying and even caring, proving the existence of this creature to the population in general. I continue to do this because I want to know. And that's my sole objective. I want to know if there's actually something out there, or the whole thing is myth and mythology. And it does turn out to be folklore, myth and mythology, then that alone makes it worth looking into, because it's a very important part of our North American folklore and history.
Where do you think the folklore came from?
Well, we inherited it from the First Nations. I mean, they had stories in their oral history and tradition, especially on the West Coast, going back long before the Europeans ever set foot in this part of North America, right? And like so many legends in our history and in their history through time, they get put in their proper place. You know, we no longer believe in dragons. Most people don't believe in vampires or werewolves and things. First Nations, they no longer believe in mythical creatures of their past, like the otter that walked on land and turns into an orca and all that stuff. But for some reason, this particular one kept going. They had different names for it. They had different beliefs about it and what it was capable of, but it was all the same thing, all up and down the West Coast. Sunaquah, Bookwas, Oma, Skookum, all kinds of First Nation names. As a matter of fact, the name Sasquatch itself was a mispronunciation and a misspelling. A Caucasian man of a First Nation named Saskatch. Basically, the way you spell it is take the word, or pronounce it, take the word basket, drop the B and SAS to it. He wrote an article in 1929 in Maclean's magazine. He mispronounced and misspelled and called it Sasquatch. It's been known as Sasquatch in Canada ever since. The American name Bigfoot came about in the late 1950s, in 1957, 58 in Northern California. Big footprints found was the article, and there was a photograph of Jerry Crew holding the casting of a, yes, they never heard of the Sasquatch in Canada, so the Big and Foot were put together. Bigfoot was born.
And thus we have the name.
Yeah, that's you have the name. But Sasquatch is generally the Canadian name, and Bigfoot's the American name for the same thing. Yeah.
Yes. Well, what do you think of there's a lot of talk about the paranormal, and obviously this is something that you don't mix with Bigfoot. Why do you think that has become so intricate in the story?
Oh, again, it's because people have wild and vivid imaginations. Back when I was a kid, they used to call it old wives' tales. This is just a continuation of that tradition, in my opinion, as far as my opinion is concerned. Yeah, in the dark, people tend to put two and together, and a lot of people have found the Sasquatch rather boring in the last couple of days, so they've come up with other things: dog men, shadow people, this and that. It's the Sasquatch become too boring for them. I mean, before the late Linda Goffrey wrote that very good book back in just before 2010, The Beast of Bray Road, I'd never heard of a single dogman sighting. Now they seem to be all over the place.
There is a lot of popularity among researchers of dogman these days, it does seem. Yes.
Yes, in my opinion, the whole dogman thing, and I'm only expressing my opinion, is all a lot of recent folklore mythology. Mythology and folklore from old Europe of werewolves and lycanthrope, as they called it in German, or loup-garou, as in French Canada. Dogman is just a continuation of that. And it can't be a werewolf, or we'd have a lot of dead people.
Probably so. Definitely. So what else would you like to tell me?
All I could say is I wish people who want to get involved in this research, I feel so sorry for new ones, because so much is just dumped on your head. Stick to the facts, never deviate from the facts, and a healthy dose of skepticism and common sense.